I'd like to show you how I machine quilt my quilts. They have little dimensions, so it's just a little trick to it, but pretty easy. You sandwich your top and your back, keeping your back larger, because if it slips, you don't want to be surprised and turn it over and find you don't have backing where you've stitched. There's a number of ways of attaching it so it won't slip. You can use just a straight pin. You can use these curved safety pins. They're pretty cool. You can't just use regular safety pins. These are bent so that if you're working on a really big quilt, they're kind of nice because you don't have to have your hand underneath to bend that quilt that pin to come back up, because it will just come back up. So you can pin it all over, and that's a great way if you're working with a big quilt and you don't want the little straight pins to slip out on the floor. There's also this quilting stitch, which is you just go under to the side like that and make like a Z stitch. Keeps it from sliding around. You just want to remove the stitches before you quilt over them. They're a little hard to remove after. This is a great one for hand quilting. But I would secure this whole quilt with one of these techniques. Then I like to use just a darning foot. And the principle being, I don't have to mess with any stitch length or change any of my stitches, my tension, because the principle of this is that it does not engage the feed dogs, so that it gives me the freedom to move that quilt wherever I want it. See, when it's down, it's not anywhere around those feed dogs, which are the mechanism that pulls your fabric. So it's going to be entirely up to me to how fast I push it through is how long the stitches are going to be and the direction. Now I use a clear filament quite often because I like that it doesn't show very much on your light or your dark. I don't have to switch the thread out, and it does come, clear filament comes in a darker clear filament as well. If you're working with a lot of darks, you can make that adjustment. So the trick is to watch your stitch, watch where the needle's going down, but also look ahead a little bit, like you do in a car. You would be your dash is in view, your dash, your speed limit and all of that, but you're really actually looking ahead on the road, and you're not going to take your eye off where you're headed, but you're still going to have this needle in your vision. There are also available all kinds of hoops and things to help you hang on to that fabric. You can use gloves that have grippers on them. Really nice as our hands age, that you don't have to have that stress in your hands, and those are great to work with. I'm not going to use it in this, but so now the idea is that I'm going to control the stitch length by pushing that through even, and the only trick for this is just practice. My first quilts were just horrific. I'd have long stitches, and then after a while somehow your brain takes over and you know exactly how fast you can go in all different directions to have a nice even stitch. Now a free motion quilting pattern is just going to be loops and around, but I'm never going to cross any of the stitches. It's just a way of being consistent with how it looks. You can cross if that's the pattern that you want to have. Go around with a straight stitch, which I'll go ahead and use my regular foot for controlling that, the stitch length on my straight. and I'll disengage, you know, take the arms off and have this so that the dimensional pieces can flip up. Then I'll straight quilt around all my straight seams. Then I will free motion around. Now the beauty of these dimensional quilts is that when I do a free motion in all of the blank spaces or the background, the dimension pops and it just looks more solid. It is just really fun to see. One thing I wanted to show you was when I put this little quilt together, I didn't exactly have a piece of batting that fit, so I pieced it, and I just whip stitched some white thread, butted it up against each other, and once it's quilted, it will stay together and be just fine. Now it is important to do your straight stitching first, because as you come around with your needle, you're going to be pushing the fabric different directions, and so your straight lines will not be as straight. You want to be able to establish those first. Now here, I'll show you on my dimension, I've quilted wherever I could. It just stabilizes that quilt and makes the dimension pop. It's wonderful. Now on the border, just choose a pattern that maybe goes with your design. So on this one, I wanted to go around each little mitten, and I didn't care if I cross stitches to get to it. And what happens are, because I didn't go through the mittens, they all pop and they just look so darling. So then I'll just finish it, go all the way around, being patient that each stitch is moved the exact same amount, left or right, up and down, so that all of your little stitches are the same length. And it's easy, it's fast. If you have a bigger quilt, I use a lot of the pins, and I'll roll it in here. Often when I sandwich it, I'll go ahead and put it on a quilting frames, because what you want on a quilt is the same tension pulled on your bottom as on your top. And sometimes that's hard to do on a bigger quilt. If you're just trying to do it on a carpet, you really do need to stretch it carefully, being careful to not overstretch the bottom and then not stretch the top, make the tension the same. I've tacked my little snow mom down, and she's all quilted. At one point, my thread on the bottom was running out, and so it was tight. And you can see how if the tension's not right, it will pull, and it pulled. So I'm going to have to release that. You want to make sure when you're stitching that it's all the same density. So if you choose to go really tight stitches, make sure you're just consistent. Then when I did sandwich it, I left plenty of batting so that when I bind it, my binding will have batting behind it. And I will show you the binding in a subsequent video, but I hope this has helped you.